From wherever you are watching this from, I'd like to welcome you to the first episode of this show. This is MarketSquare. My name is Oluwapelubi Awe, and I will be your host on this show. On this show, MarketSquare, I bring to you economic and business updates and moves made by either the public or the private sector, and also share with you the impact these can have on your personal economy. And there's also the Nigerian Funfact part of the show, and I don't think I should tell you about that, but I would like for you to find out that yourself when we get in the show. Today, we will be discussing two moves that can impact you significantly. The first move is by the Presidential Committee on Fiscal Policy and Tax Reforms, and the second move by the CBN in the foreign exchange market. We'll get into that in a moment. Let's go for a short break. When we are back, I will take you there deeply. Welcome back. It's still your show, MarketSquare. The 28.7 trillion naira budget for the year 2024, earlier presented on the 1st of January, has a deficit of 9.18 trillion naira. In addition, Nigeria services debt with 98% of its revenue, a debt stock of about 87.9 trillion naira, and an infrastructure deficit pegged at $3 trillion over 30 years by the World Bank. That's a lot. But as far back as August 2023, President Bola Ahmed Tinubu set up the Presidential Fiscal Policy and Tax Reform Committee. And that was done to address critical economic challenges in Nigeria through fiscal policy and tax reforms. This committee was established with three main aims. Number one, the committee was set up to improve efficiency and transparency in government spending and revenue collection. And secondly, the committee was designed to help expand the tax base and also increasing non-tax revenue and enhancing tax administration. And lastly, it was set up to create a more attractive environment for investment and to also foster inclusive economic growth. Recently, the chairman of the committee, Mr. Taiwo Oyedele, on behalf of the committee announced that in a bid to improve the tax to GDP ratio, which is presently very low, there is the need to scrap the nuisance tax, To discuss the proposed elimination of the nuisance tax and its overall impact, MarketSquare reporter Favour Eya had a conversation with Mr. Olasoji Odunayo, who is a seasoned accountant and a tax professional. Take a listen.
In our session with Mr. Odunayo, who is a professional tax consultant, he began by outlining the purpose of nuisance taxes. He claimed that due to the sheer number of taxes, it is considered a nuisance.
Like you said, this abolition or eradicating of nuisance taxes is one of the major recommendations of the Presidential Fiscal Team set up by Mr. President and added by Mr. Taiwo Oyedele. And now, nuisance taxes are usually small amounts of state levy taxes, paid by end users. All right, now the term nuisance, of course, it's more derogatory word used to describe the kind of tax, because they are usually very small amount of taxes. Is considered nuisance because of the frequency in which they are paid. All right. Yeah. And of course, also in the Nigerian context, because of the sense of state actors or non-state actors that are actually engaged to collect those taxes. All right. Of course, call them the agberos and the likes. So that is where the name came from. So they are usually small taxes paid usually at subnational levels, all right, local government level, at the state level, small markets, and trade unions, like the NURTW and all of that. So small amounts that are charged, but because of the frequency in which they are charged, and because of the fact, the kinds of people that are engaged to enforce it, and that is why it is usually referred to as nuisance taxes. All right. So, of course, the end user, which is the consumer, eventually bears, even though most of the time it's not the end user that pays, does the payments, all right, directly to the government. It is usually, paid by either service provider or those who are selling the products that are being taxed. But eventually, they also shift the responsibility or the burden of this tax on the end users, by, of course, moving the cost of those things on the prices of their product or service. So that's basically how nuisance taxes work.
When questioned if this tax was effective, he responded that while the population's participation makes the aggregate level of taxation quite effective, non-state actors' engagement causes the taxes to be tampered with at some point throughout the process. Nonetheless, the government was meant to handle this.
The numbers that were given, 16 taxes at the federal level, 25 at the state, 21 at the local government, this is not actually strictly the number of nuisance taxes. They are basically just the number of taxes generally collected at those different levels of government. All right. That includes the ones that are generally known and the ones that, a lot of us probably, do not know. All right. Because they probably are paid by a select sector or a select group of people. All right. So, but in terms of collection, especially coming down to nuisance taxes, all right, now as compared to generally acceptable taxes, all right, that are not considered as nuisance, interestingly, nuisance taxes have one of the highest effectiveness in collection. All right, they have one of the highest rates of effectiveness in collection at the level of collection. Now, at the level of the remittances getting into the coffers of the states, somewhere along the line, a good part of these funds are lost. All right, and I'm going to give some figures. For instance, now you have a situation where the Federal Inland Revenue Service, is collecting, in 2023, is collecting something as small as, generally now, a total amount of 12.4 trillion in 2023 as the total, tax collection, and a good part of these funds, are non-oil, oil revenue. But the part that is non-oil revenue is such that we know that given the capacity of the states, given the capacity of the population that is bearing this tax, there's a lot more that can be collected. For instance, we have an estimate in Lagos, for instance, in some areas in Lagos, that Lagos has the capacity to probably produce up to 123 billion naira, from just collections from motorcycles, tricycles, buses, not to talk about money being collected from market stalls and all of that. Now, but the truth is this: as much as you have a lot of these funds being collected at the collection level, you have a paltry part of this money coming into the coffers of the states. All right. Now, why do we have a high collection, rate? Because, of course, majorly because these collection agents, who are mostly non-state actors, like I said earlier, they have a stake in these collections. All right, and we're going to come to this, later on when we start talking about the social impact of this, of these taxes. All right, so we have a situation where these people have something at stake most of the time. When they collect these taxes, they know that a larger percentage of these taxes is not going to be remitted to the government. So they know that the more they can collect, the higher the percentage that eventually comes to them. Because apart from what is being remitted to government, a lot of at different levels of authority, these funds get to be shared, to different people that are non-state actors, such that a very minute percentage eventually comes in the coffers of the state. So because of the fact that these people have something at stake, they know that if I collect so much, I will get so much. They ensure that the collection is as effective as possible. And that's why you will find that, at the level of, for instance, the levies and all that are being collected from, buses, tricycles, motorcycles, for instance, you will hardly find a driver escape, from these guys, because they know that they have to pay, because they know how much they have to collect and what is in it for them. So as compared to the regular state taxes that are usually collected by civil servants, and the state actors like staff of the Federal Inland Revenue Service and the state inland revenue services, you see a situation where the collection rate is very high and highly effective. But how much of that now gets into the coffers of the government and translates into revenue that can be used for the development of the state, for the development of the country, is where there's a problem and still leaves a lot to be desired.
Mr. Oduayo expressed his opinion on the idea of doing away with nuisance taxes, saying that he thought the main issue with them was how cumbersome they were. He chose not to participate in the scrapping since, at the very least, it will impact revenue generation. He continued by saying that it would be preferable to harmonize or combine these many taxes rather than eliminate them. Additionally, he brought up the fact that citizens are paying more taxes than necessary because of non-state actors' involvement.
Well, so for us to talk about the scrapping, we have to put it in context, because the scrapping is not the idea of scrapping this or removing these taxes is not totally about removing it. All right. What the committee has been commissioned to do is to basically look at all these taxes and see how we can synergize these taxes. All right. Such that eventually, even though these taxes are somehow still being paid, but first of all, we now have a harmonized system. Because sometimes what makes taxes burdensome is the fact that, for instance, you have a situation where the federal government is collecting a particular kind of tax. Then the state government is also collecting that same kind of tax. And then you find, and I'm going to give an example, for instance, you have, for instance, you have the state government collecting consumption taxes, from most of the time, entertainment and hospitality-based businesses, like restaurants, hotels, and the rest of them. And then you have the federal government still collecting the VAT, value-added tax. Now, the truth is this: for most business owners, what the VAT is almost similar to what the consumption tax is. So why don't you both come together and decide which one are we removing, and then leave us with one, if possible, probably merge whatever it is, and let's be paying to one person. All right. And the same thing applies to a number of taxes you find, for instance, on local government collecting development levy, and you also find the state government collecting development levy. Is there a way we can bring together these development levies we are paying on different levels and merge it into one? All right. So it's not outrightly about scrapping. And for me, if it is not about completely scrapping them, I feel that it's a great idea. Because the truth is, the revenues have to be the issue for most citizens. All right, when it comes to taxes and when it comes to remittance of taxes, it's not totally, about an unwillingness to pay. All right, most of the time, it is mostly, all right, and I'm not saying this is a general rule, but most of the time in our interactions, especially as professionals, when we interact with business owners, we interact with individuals, the issue for them mostly is about what are these taxes being used for? What is the end game for these taxes, and how does this paying these taxes make my life better. All right. Then number two issue for most businesses, is the fact that now, how do we pay these taxes? Because a major requirement for taxes, for instance, a major thing in tax balance, we always say that a major thing that must be ensured in tax collection is convenience for the payer of the tax. In a situation where you find taxpayers being bothered by this person, that person, different, coming from different places on the same kind of tax. Sometimes it appears as though they are being taxed, multiple times on the same thing. So if there's an harmonization that ensures that even though we are still collecting the same tax, but now it is just one person, for instance, one body. So for instance, like those taxes that I mentioned that are being collected, maybe both at federal level and state level, for instance, and we sit down and agree that, okay, we're paying 5% here, we're paying 7.5% here. Can we all come together and say, okay, only one person, maybe the federal or the state, is collecting this and we are paying 10%. Now, they both now decide how it's going to be shared between them. All right. And that is the major thing, that is the challenge. If that can be resolved, then I perfectly agree with the idea of scrapping, or I would better put it, harmonizing these taxes, such that instead of having multiplicity of taxes at different levels, we now have unified, maybe 5, 7, at most 10 taxes that everybody knows that officially this is what everybody has to pay. Another challenge with the current collection method, is the fact that because you have multiple bodies making the demand for these taxes, you leave the space for non-state actors, you leave the space for even corrupt state actors to take advantage of people's ignorance and make them pay more taxes than they should pay. All right. So you have situations where you find non-state actors just come to your place and ask for a tax that's probably not even existent. All right, because they know that there are so many, you can't mentally keep tabs on them. So they just come and say, you're supposed to pay this. And because they are non-state actors, their method of collection is violence. So most people, because they don't want to engage in that violence, they don't want, destruction of their lives or destruction of their properties, they just oblige and pay these taxes, even though they don't know why they are paying it, or those taxes are not even actually legal to be collected. So the thing is this: if we're able to find a way to harmonize these taxes, make everybody, know that these are the few number of taxes that everybody is supposed to pay. And then, all the necessary bodies that are in charge of this collection find a way to harmonize, either working through the joint tax board, for instance, or any other, or working with this committee that has been set up by Mr. President, to bring everybody and align us to know that these are the few taxes we are paying, and we all know it, and we have find a legal, proper way of making them paid. Then I really do think that there's money from scrapping nuisance taxes and harmonizing the tax system that we're currently making. Because right now, even though we have so many taxes being collected, a larger part of these taxes, are being filtered away by non-state actors that are involved in the collection process. And this is what we can, if we block all these loopholes, I think we're going to make more from scrapping these nuisance taxes, and regularizing and harmonizing all the taxes we have into a better shaped, few taxes that are more effectively.
When asked how best the government should deal with issues of non-state actors, he began by saying that addressing societal issues rather than utilizing forces was the best way for the government to deal with problems involving non-state actors. He continued by saying that they ought to be removed, mended, and trained in other phases of the society where they would be of service, perhaps in the form of skill development. He made examples of repentant terrorists and kidnappers and opposed allowing them to remain in a reform system because he believed they would revert to their old ways.
Okay. So the thing is this. We have to understand that, like you said, these people we call non-state actors are basically, touts, people, and they are part of our society. So the first thing is to recognize the fact that we cannot deny the fact that we have a system that is breeding, that is actively breeding these guys on a daily basis. All right. We have broken families, we have a broken education system, all of those social issues. And these are the systems that are feeding this, sector of non-state, actors. All right. So you have a lot of families that are broken, children come from those places, become all kinds of things, and then you have a lot of schools that are not working, you have an education system that needs a lot of reform. All of that are the social issues that are feeding, this. All right. So it will be living in denial for us to try and deny the fact that these guys are there and then send policemen after them and try to, because the truth is, a human being must survive. That's just the truth. So most of the time, the reason some of them are even engaged in these things is survival instincts. All right. So they ask themselves, what can I do at this level where I am? I don't have skills, I don't have education, I don't know anybody, and all of that. And then they get into this. All right. So we cannot deny them. So the best approach is not to send, security operatives after them. All right. The first approach is to address the social issues. If we are trying to address this from a wholesome perspective, the first approach is to try and address these social issues that is feeding this, anomaly in our system. All right. Work on our education system, for instance, to ensure that, schools are doing their job properly. We don't have schools producing touts, and all kinds of people. All right. We have a, we begin to work on ensuring that parents are more responsible for their children, and they do what is right, all of that, but more importantly is the fact that now we have these guys that are already there. They are currently these non-state actors that collect all these funds. And then if we are going to scrap the system, we must find a way to get these guys engaged. All right. Either by finding, skills that they can, and government has a number of, you have the National Board for Technical Education, for instance, that can be properly, restructured to be more active. We have our technical schools at different points in this country. We have our polytechnics where people can go and get skills that they can use. I believe so strongly that one of the major ways to get these guys out of the streets, and get them more effective is not by denying or running after them and hounding them and taking them into prisons and all that. No, it is by, first of all, finding ways to engage them productively. All right. So, and that was also one of the things mentioned on the sidelines by the committee, that even, got the committee into some social media, controversy when people started saying that they were suggesting that touts and agberos should be used to collect taxes. What they were trying to suggest is find productive ways to engage these guys. All right. Of course, when you are found ways to, by providing them with skills, like I said, providing them with resources they need to be able to get engaged. All right. Maybe, for instance, raising, giving them, short-term and small, funding to be able to start their businesses, run the businesses, and provide the support needed for those businesses to survive. If we can get to do that, now the few that still refuse to align and still insist on, doing the things they are doing and causing nuisance to the state can probably now be dealt with the full length, of the law. But if we don't address the issues, the social issues that are, feeding, this anomaly, and we just try to use state actors, try to use law enforcement agencies, to try and hound them and silence them, we're going to just create more chaos and more criminality, in the state, because these guys already have everything needed to cause chaos already. So if you decide to push them to the wall, what you're going to have is as a result, is chaos. So let's address the issues, and then the ones that refuse to allow the issues to be addressed and still insist on criminality, we can now, engage state law enforcement agents, to make them align to what they should do. So that's how I feel that particular challenge, can be addressed if you fully want to address it, because that would take some political will, that would take some willingness to make some concessions from the side of government. And reason why some of these things have backfired in some places also is because they were not properly addressed. There were some political undertones sometimes, even in the incentives to engage these guys. Government released funds for these guys to be trained in skills, and before you know it, someone has taken some of those funds. Before you know it, a good part of that fund is not used for what it should be used for. We have a corruption reading system, and these are things that have to be addressed for us to be able to get these guys out of the streets, if we are taking food out of their mouth.
But on the brighter side, he considered a pattern where they will be withdrawn, trained, and then the qualified ones will be recruited through a proper recruitment system.
Oh, so the thing is this, all right, like I said before, the current system is based on the fact that, okay, these guys, we need these monies to be collected at local government level, at state level particularly. We need these monies to be collected. We do not have the manpower to be able to collect these taxes effectively. All right. If you work with the staff, the local government staff, the state's internal revenue staff, you do not have the manpower sufficient enough to be able to collect these taxes. So we decide, okay, we take advantage of a problem that is already existent. We have these staff that they're not doing anything, causing nuisance in society. We decide, okay, let's engage them, to collect these taxes. But because of the fact that, if these people are not reformed properly, all right, you cannot, if someone is a child, there's a training that the person has received such that the person is not trained to be civil in anything they do. All right. So I believe so strongly that as much as training these guys to collect, taxes, might be a great idea, but in our context, it might also backfire. All right. It's like, for instance, the idea of catching kidnappers and terrorists, for instance, then reforming them and then sending them back to the policemen. All right, it's a 50-50 chance. All right, that person can become, yes, a reformed terrorist or a reformed criminal and do well for the states. But that person also can get back, into the system and cause more damage, because now the person is now an insider, unlike when the person was an outsider. The same thing applies to these guys, because if we say, yeah, we reform them, we bring them back to the system, it could work in terms of the fact that, yeah, they've been in the system, so they know how the collection should work, and eventually, it could bring more money for the government. But the challenge is also that could also backfire, because these people have, if, for instance, I know that every day before I collect, say, 1 million naira, and out of that 1 million, now about maybe 300,000 comes to my personal pocket. I remit the remaining, to different people, and maybe eventually, maybe 100,000 gets into the purse of the government. All right. Now, if I am being employed directly by the state is not going to give me, if I collect that 1 million, the state is not going to give me 300,000, because it doesn't work that way. So eventually, I'm asking questions. When I was doing it independently, I was collecting this much. Now the state has employed me. They are cutting down what I'm supposed to collect as a result. So there's a high likelihood that that kind of person will still now devise ways to make that 300,000 themselves, using, corrupt means. And at the end of the day, what we were trying to achieve by reforming them, in quotes, and trying to bring them into the system, we might now eventually lose all that gain, in the fact that eventually they still find ways to bring the corrupt way they were running this collection into, and now even officialize it, make it official now. All right, it now becomes corruption that was outside, now becomes official corruption. So I would not completely subscribe to the idea of reforming them and then bringing them in to be the ones to collect these things. No, let's reform them, find appropriate skills in other areas for them to learn. Now we can now create a recruitment system for those who will be collecting these taxes, a proper recruitment system that will, have the necessary requirements. Any of them that qualifies, can apply through that normal recruitment system. And if the person gets in, fine. But it won't be that we just want to reform them solely and bring them in for the same purpose. I feel it to be counterproductive. Do you understand what I'm saying now? I prefer that we get them trained in other areas, in other skills, carpentry, fashion designing, tech skills, whatever skills that they can train them in those things, enable them to start those businesses and try and provide as much support for them. Then for our tax collection, we now create a recruitment system for tax collectors. If any of them is now interested in doing that and they apply, they will go through the normal process. And if they qualify and they get in, they would operate with the same rules that every other person within the civil service or within the tax collection system is operating by. Not that we are reforming people that were, that were non-state actors, and then trying to just bring them to the system. I feel that just as we have had sometimes with security architecture, these people become the weak link within the system, and sometimes they cause more harm than good within the tax collection system.
Our next talk point on the show today is on the recent injection of $500 million by the Central Bank of Nigeria to clear FX backlogs. But before that, let's do the numbers. Since the CBN's instruction to banks to harmonize reporting requirements on foreign currencies, the free fall of Naira has noticeably reduced its pace. As of today, going by the CBN's exchange rate, $1 exchanges for 1,408 Naira. And on the black market, $1 exchanges for 1,440 Naira, both on the buying and the selling side. Now, that seems like an improvement on what we had previously. And I'm guessing that the instruction has begun to gain its ground and has started making the required impact. But hopefully, in the coming days, these Naira should gain some level of value back and improve in the way it can be used to make transaction happen here or there. On the 29th of January 2024, the Central Bank of Nigeria announced that it has injected an additional $500 million into the foreign exchange market. Now, this comes barely a week after it announced that it had so far disbursed approximately $2 billion across pivotal sectors like the manufacturing sector, the aviation sector, and even the petroleum sector. On this issue, I had a conversation with an economist who is a doctor and a lecturer at Adeyemi Federal University of Education, Dr. Taiwo Oyedele, to discuss it even deeper than the surface. Take a listen. Dr. Oyedele, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much.
It's awesome to have you join us on MarketSquare today. We will be discussing, like I told you, like you are aware already, about the present CBN injection of additional $500 million to clear FX backlogs. There's a lot to say about that, but I think we should start from the point where the CBN governor made it clear at some point that the bank is focusing on fundamental issues that have hindered the effective operation of the Nigerian FX market over the years. So a good place to start would be to ask you, what are the fundamental issues that have prevented, smooth operation of the Nigerian FX market over the years? Yes.
Okay, thank you so much. Yeah, if you have been following the trend of things in Nigeria for some years now, we will discover that one of the dominant problems of foreign exchange is scarcity of dollar. Over the years now, we are facing this crisis. The CBN have been trying everything possible, but we couldn't find solution to this scarcity due to some problems that I don't know, maybe I'll be permitted to mention them.
Please go on, sir.
The reasons why we are having scarcity of dollars in Nigeria today. We are depending on the crude oil as our main source of income. And then over time now, we know our debt has increased in Nigeria. And the money we are making from the crude oil, we are only using it to service debt. So we cannot save, we cannot build our foreign reserves. And since that time now, we have been facing this crisis of foreign exchange in Nigeria. So that's the major dominant problem we are. Another one is the inconsistent policies by the CBN. An attempt to stabilize the naira to solve this problem, the CBN has been introducing all kinds of policies. But we discovered that those policies, they are not consistent, they are unable to solve the problem. So these are just two major problems.
Okay, I think you mentioned the fact that we don't have enough foreign exchange reserve, and we don't also have a kind of a steady and consistent policy. And how about if I mention lack of transparency in the system? Because investors won't find confidence when the policy is not very consistent. Am I right with that, sir?
Definitely. That is the problem. The people that actually, apart from we, the Nigerians that are facing the problems, another set of people that are having serious issue with this problem are the importers and the investors. No investors want to come and invest in any economy where their naira is not stable. If they come to Nigeria, if they borrow the money, and they know that by the time they want to pay the money back, they are going to pay in fourfold within a year. So investors, they don't want to come into that kind of economy. Also, when they know that when they make profit, it will be very difficult for them to repatriate their profits. And that is exactly why we are having foreign exchange backlog in Nigeria today.
Okay.
And also for the manufacturers, that are depending on the importation of raw materials to produce, they need dollars to buy those materials. So apart from Nigerians, today we have so many Nigerians studying abroad now. They want to pay their school fees, they have to pay in dollars. So once they can't get dollars, that's the problem. So apart from the Nigerians, the investors and the manufacturers are also suffering because of this foreign exchange crisis in Nigeria today.
It's not the best possible news to hear, but I guess that was the reason the CBN governor made it clear when he was being inaugurated, it was being installed there, to say that, the first thing he wants to do is to help solve fundamental issues in our monetary system. But let's now drive very quickly to the essence of this conversation today, which is to speak about the injection of $500 million by the CBN to clear the FX backlog that was preceded. Now, some weeks back, it was declared that the CBN actually paid $2 billion. And we also are aware that there are more things to be cleared. There are more FX backlogs to be cleared. So the question is this: why do we have so much FX backlogs to be cleared? And secondly, why did the Central Bank of Nigeria need to come in to clear the backlogs?
Okay, thank you. Yeah, let me start by explaining what you mean by foreign exchange backlog. Foreign exchange backlog refers to the demand for foreign exchange by investors, manufacturers, and individuals that are yet to be met. Like I mentioned earlier, that the investors, once they make profits, they are permitted by the law to repatriate part of that profit back to their home countries. And when they now demand for dollars, they want to return the money in dollars, and once they make demand for dollars and they could not get dollars, that is a backlog. Likewise, the manufacturers, when they want to import their raw materials, they have to buy in dollars. And for them to make that purchase, that means they have to convert their naira to dollars. So when they make demand for dollars and they could not get, that results in backlog. So over the years, those investors and the manufacturers and even Nigerians, they have been demanding for dollars, foreign exchange, but they couldn't get. So that one now constitutes what we call foreign exchange backlog. And the reason for the backlog is dollar scarcity. It's the scarcity of dollars. So that is why the CBN, they are now trying to make sure they clear the backlog, because it's already constituting serious problem for us in the economy, because that situation is driving away investors, and it is also killing our productivity, because the manufacturers, the industrialists are finding it difficult now to get their raw materials to continue their production. So that is why exactly the CBN, they are making series of effort now, and they are injecting a lot of money into the economy so that they can clear the backlog, because if they don't do so, the crisis will be more than what we are witnessing now.
Wow. That's a lot. That's a lot to take in. But a few persons have also mentioned that the reason we have so much backlog is that because we are a monoproduct FX earner, in other words, that our major source of income in a large proportion comes from oil. And I'd like for you to just speak to the idea of us being focused on oil revenue alone. And do you think that the fact that we are focused majorly on oil, do you think that has contributed to the FX backlog that we have at the moment?
Yes, our major problem in Nigeria today is depending on oil revenue alone. That is the major problem. Our failure to diversify our economy is one of the problems of this foreign exchange crisis we are having now. We are depending on oil revenue alone. And like I told you now, this money we are making from oil is not sufficient now to build our economy. And that is exactly why we are going outside to go and borrow money again and again. And now when you borrow money, you are going to pay the debt, and you are going to pay with interest. So the money we are now making from the crude oil is what we are using to service debt now. And the profit we are making that we're supposed to be using to build our foreign reserves is what we are using to service the debt. And for us to make money, we have to export. We have to sell to other countries. And now in Nigeria, our productivity is very low. We are not, it's just like we are consuming nation. We are not producing anymore. Our productivity is very low. And once our productivity is very low, our export will be low. And from that export, that is the place where we're supposed to work to make money so that we can meet the demand of this demand for foreign exchange. So over dependency on crude oil is a major problem. And that is why we have been shouting over the years that we need to diversify our economy. We have so many natural resources that we can tap in this country to generate income. But those resources are wasted in Nigeria today. Also, another problem is our poor value-added products. Our productivity are very low in quality, and they cannot command the demand outside Nigeria. And when we cannot produce high quality products that can dominate market in foreign market, that is another problem. And that is why it is very difficult for us to make money outside the crude oil. So that's the problems. That is why the over reliance on crude oil revenue, that is why we are having this scarcity, because it is very difficult for us to make money outside crude oil.
Well, I think what has been said repeatedly by everyone has been the fact that we rely heavily on imports of essential goods, raw materials, which has led to consistent demand for foreign currency. And I connect to that very strongly. But there's another point that is on the fact that maybe one reason we are having so much backlog is because of the multiple exchange rate. And before President Bola Ahmed Tinubu was inaugurated, the CBN maintained a fixed official exchange rate, which was created some opportunities for some people who usually take advantage of the market and then put pressure on the official rate. So I'm asking now, do you also think that the multiple exchange rate has also played its role in the FX backlog that has been cleared? And I hear that we still have some left that we have not cleared.
Thank you. Yes. You see, as far as we are having scarcity of foreign exchange in Nigeria, I don't think it will be very easy to collapse the multiple windows of foreign exchange windows in Nigeria. People capitalize on those economic situations, weaknesses. As far we have scarcity of dollars, we are going to have what? We are going to have parallel markets. And that is why, even though when the new president now, that is the Ahmed Bola Tinubu, and promised that he will stabilize Naira. The CBN governor, they have been making series of efforts, but you will discover, despite that they fees and they try to collapse the multiple foreign exchange windows, you discover that they are yet to succeed in that area. Why? As far as we are having foreign exchange scarcity, it will be very, very difficult for them to succeed. In any economy where demand is greater than supply, there's going to be a problem. It is when the demand is equal to supply that we can have stability. And in order to solve that problem, and that is why you see the CBN, they are devaluing our Naira from time to time. But you will discover that up to today, they are unable to stabilize Naira. Why? Because the real problem is yet to be tackled, and that is by increasing our productivity. So every effort they are making might not achieve their objectives until they are able to solve the problem of scarcity of foreign exchange in Nigeria.
Very, very true. Very, very true. As to the fact that once you don't increase production, the tendency that you would have a very good and steady and stable currency with respect to dollar is very, very slim. Okay, but again,
Exactly.
there's also the question of we've seen the CBN recently, like I mentioned already, intervened by spending out about $500 million to clear FX backlogs. But I know the CBN is the Zenith Bank in any country, but I want to ask you, why do you think the CBN had to step in? What do you think played out in the mind of the CBN governor and the team to step in to say, see, let's clear this thing if we want things to get better? What do you think played out in their mind?
Okay, they need to step in at least to reduce this problem, because their failure to step in will multiply the crisis. But even though the effort they are currently making by releasing the money is just a temporary measure, not a permanent solution to this problem. They are just trying to provide a temporary measure, thinking that if they can stabilize Naira, the investors can come to Nigeria. So the effort is very good, but we are talking about just to clear the backlog. Now, that does not mean another backlog will not result tomorrow. So it's just a temporary measure. And it's just a laudable effort, but it's a temporary measure. What we need now in Nigeria is to find a permanent solution to this problem. And that is when we can have what? Stability of Naira. But every other effort we are making without trying to stop this scarcity of foreign exchange, every effort we are making will just be temporary, just to ease the tension, just to provide temporary measures that can attract foreign investors and that can enable the manufacturers to continue productivity. So I believe What we need now is permanent solution. The injection of that money is good, but it's a temporary measure to solve the foreign exchange crisis in Nigeria today.
I guess you are way into the question I'm about to ask you now. And the question is, I know you've mentioned a few ideas as to what we need to do going forward, but this is a question that I think will wrap that up. How do we forestall accumulating so much FX backlog? I know you mentioned the fact that when demand is more than supply, there will be a lot of pressure. I want to just speak to the idea of how do we forestall, how do we prevent accumulating so much FX backlogs?
Thank you so much. Number one is to diversify our economy. We need to diversify our economy. Let us tap all the natural resources that we have in this country. God has blessed us with so many natural resources that we can tap and be one of the richest countries in the world. So many of these natural resources are just wasting while we are depending on oil revenue alone. So if we can make effort to diversify our economy, we are going to reduce this pressure on foreign exchange. That's number one. Number two, we need to increase our productivity in agriculture and the manufacturing sectors. You know, before we gain our independence, we were depending on agricultural products. Agricultural products constitute almost more than 50% our revenue at that time. Our naira was very, very strong at that particular time. But because we abandoned agriculture, focusing on oil revenue alone, and that is why we are having this problem today. So one of the second solution is to make sure we invest in our agricultural sector and manufacturing sector. We need this. Like I said earlier, our manufacturing products are of low quality that cannot compete with with other countries in international market. So we need to invest. And then another solution is to increase our value added products, goods and services. So if we can work on those things, we are going to reduce the pressure on our foreign exchange today in Nigeria.
All right. You've mentioned quite some powerful points here. Diversify the economy, increase production, invest, and increase our value-added products. And I think those are really, really important if we choose or intend to clear backlogs or even prevent it from happening again and again and again. But I think we cannot put aside the point of attracting foreign investment. I want you to speak on that even some more. Attracting foreign investment. How do you think this will impact our economy and reduce the FX pressure?
Thank you so much. Yes, we need foreign investment in our economy. As far as we don't have sufficient money to build our economy, we are going to rely on foreign investors. They are coming with their money, and when they invest in our economy, they are going to provide employment for the people. They are going to pay tax to the government, and all those things, they are source of income to the economy. However, before any investors they will come, we must provide conducive environment. Our conducive environment are one of those things that can attract investors to our economy. For instance, now look at insecurity in Nigeria today. Insecurity is scaring investors away in Nigeria today. Nobody wants to come and invest in a country where they know that they are not even safe and their investment is not also safe. And also, like I said earlier, the instability in our naira is also discouraging the investors. Like I said, most of these investors, when they come, they will likely borrow money from our financial institutions. But when they borrow money today and they know that when they are going to pay this money back, they are going to pay back in 4 times. Why? Because we are devalue our naira every day. Almost every day we are devaluing our naira. And that means by the time they want to pay the money back, they are going to pay in double fold or in triple fold. So all those things will be discouraging investors from coming. So for us to attract investors into Nigeria today, number one, we need to take care of our insecurity. And number two, we must make sure we stabilize our naira. So all those things are very needed. If foreign investment is very good for us, it's very good for any economy all over the world. However, we have to play our own part by providing the conducive environment those investors they need. And also, we must also make sure that when they make their profit and they are able to repatriate their profit as allowed by the law, until we are able to provide this environment, it will be very, very difficult for us to attract sufficient investment, foreign investment into the country.
Thank you. It's amazing how everything ties together. How that creating a conducive environment can attract foreign investors to come and invest. It's amazing how these things connect, and we don't seem to have found our place in terms of securing our nation and making it as conducive as possible for people who want to come to Nigeria to invest. And I'm sure the outside world, they are watching us very closely and watching the moves we are making and to see the things that are happening now. And that leads me to my next question, which probably will be the last question on the show today. And it is to say, we've seen the CBN intervene since President Bola Ahmed Tinubu was inaugurated. We've seen the CBN intervene at different times to clear this thing. So I'm going to ask you, do you think this consistent intervention by the CBN will instill in investors trust and attract foreign investment? Do you think this consistent intervention by the CBN every time trying to come in to fill the gap, do you think this will instill trust in investors and attract foreign investment?
Yes, to some extent. To some extent, it can encourage the investors into the country. You know, the investors are also monitoring, they are monitoring what is going on in our economy today. They are monitoring. So they are monitoring the move of the CBN. And if they can see some indications that those policies are working, some of them might be convinced to come. Some of those investors can decide to come. So that is why those efforts they are making, they are very good. They are very good, but we need consistent, we need reliable, we need stable, and we need permanent solution to this problem. Like I told you, most of these policies of the CBN is just to provide a temporary solution, not permanent solution. And what we need now is what is a permanent solution. So I agree with some of these policies that it can attract some, but if we can find a lasting solution to this problem, I know more investors will come into our economy.
Wow. Do you see Nigeria getting to a point where the CBN will not have to intervene this quickly? Because it was too quick. It intervened at some point in January, intervened again, and then thinking of intervening again. Do you think this will continue? And when do you see this ending, this continuous intervention ending?
I cannot tell where this situation will end until the government and everybody in Nigeria, until we go back to basis by increasing our productivity so that we can earn foreign exchange. That is the permanent solution. When we increase our productivity and we are able to generate sufficient funds to take care of our foreign exchange demand, then that is why we can what? We can now put our hands on the table that we are succeeding. But any effort we are making aside that one, they will always offer us temporary solution to the problem. So what I'm expecting from the government now is what? Is to invest in agricultural sector, manufacturing sector, and tapping our natural resources so that we can export those things to other countries and make money so that we can build our foreign reserves. And then once we have a strong foreign reserve, then anytime we can make foreign exchange available for demand.
Wow, thank you so very, very much. I'm just going to pick out a few things you've said, and then yes. So you mentioned that we need to put our energy even in investing in our country and producing more things. And you also mentioned about security, because some of our farmers now are running away from the farm because of insecurity in the nation. And we are not lazy people. We want to work. People want to work. But if they don't have that environment that helps them that gives them the assurance that their lives are safe and secured, they may not want to go to the farm to do what's expected. And if they don't do what is expected, we cannot have enough to produce. And if we don't have enough to produce, this pressure will continue. Is that correct, sir?
Definitely. And that's why I mentioned security the other time, that we need security. For any economy to be stable, we need security for investors to come to Nigeria. So we need to provide that conducive environment for productivity and for the investors.
It's been a wonderful conversation with you, Dr. Akilo. Thank you so much for your time and insight. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you for the opportunity.
Remember that when I started the show, I told you that there is a Nigerian fun fact part of this show, that now we are there. But let me ask you first. Do you like attending parties? I mean, wedding receptions. I mean, burial reception of somebody who is elderly and died. I mean, Owambes. Do you like attending parties? All right, because today's fun fact is one that those who like attending parties can relate with significantly. Let's see. Asoebi is a Yoruba term that translates to family cloth. It refers to a unique and coordinated fabric chosen by a group of individuals for a specific event or occasion. The fabric is then used to create outfits for members of the group, creating a sense of unity and identity. The practice of wearing uniform attire at social gatherings in Nigeria makes a significant contribution to the country's economy in various ways. Speaking on its direct impact on the economy, Asoebi generates substantial revenue for the textile and fashion industries. The Asoebi industry contributes billions of dollars to the Nigerian economy each year. In 2018, the textile industry contributed an estimated 1.3 trillion naira to Nigeria's GDP. Fabrics like lace, Ankara, and sleek are purchased in bulk, creating demand for manufacturers, distributors, and retailers. Secondly, tailors and designers across the country benefit from sewing Asoebi outfits, generating income and employment opportunities. This includes formal businesses and individual tailors working from home. Thirdly, the demand for complementary accessories like hair ties, shoes, and jewelry rises with Asoebi events, boosting sales for small businesses and artisans. Indirectly, the economic impact of Asoebi is far-reaching. For example, large Asoebi events often involve travel and accommodation, benefiting hotels, transportation services, and tourism operators. Also, the catering and event planning industries see increased business due to the demand for catering and organizing large gatherings associated with Asoebi events. Not to forget that businesses advertise their products and services through Asoebi branding, promoting awareness and potentially leading to increased sales. To the benefit side, Asoebi provides employment opportunities for a variety of individuals, from weavers and designers to sellers and marketers, contributing to household income and poverty reduction. Asoebi promotes and preserves Nigerian cultural heritage by keeping traditional fabrics and designs alive. This practice fosters a sense of community and belonging by bringing people together in shared attire and celebrating occasions collectively. Thank you for joining today on Economic Funfact. With that, I say thank you for joining me on the show today. Do well to follow us on all our social media platforms to get an update every time we make a post. YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn. Follow us on all these platforms and you will be glad you did. Now join me next week, Thursday, as I bring you something even fresh and go deeper into something that I believe will impact you significantly. My name is Oluwakpelubiawe and I hope to see you soon.